Everyone, my name is Amandhi Marasinghe, and I will be breaking down the round 5 motion from the Shanthi Peries Memorial Debating Championship. So, the motion is this house prefers a world where God or gods are viewed as dystheistic rather than morally infallible. So, in the motion side, they have given us exactly what dystheism is, and therefore, you don't necessarily need to define what those words mean. Rather, it's more important to apply them to the motion itself. So in this, it's important to like highlight what the differences are. In this belief suggests that God could embody both positive and negative traits and may act in ways that humans perceive as sometimes cruel or unjust or even simply inconsistent. So what's important for like context here is that how in this hypothetical world, dystheism is the prevailing belief and it contrasts with traditional views in which the gods or God are expected to be morally flawless. So, this worldview will basically shift human perspectives on morality, justice, and faith. So, you need to highlight exactly why this world, as proposition and even opposition, how this world is so different to the current perception of religion that is currently in place. So, in terms of the framework and setup, so we need to specify that this is, in fact, a hypothetical world in which this belief is culturally dominant. So, therefore, this allows the debate to focus than the rather on personal religious or theological convictions. It's better so that we can focus on what the societal and psychological implications are rather than what it means as an individual person and how this contributes to society as a whole. So we can assess how this motion will impact overall by talking about the effect on moral and ethical behavior of people as a group and as an individual, the influence that will have on social and political structures. And also, we can talk about how there will be this psychological and emotional implication on individuals and communities. And it's very important to distance like the what the prevailing attitudes towards religion are at the moment, because this is a concept that has not been imposed in this world before. So for them, the idea of God being morally infallible isn't doesn't exist basically. So before that, so next let's go into arguments. So first we can talk about proposition. So under proposition, we can see that in a world with dystheistic gods, we have humans who develop a more nuanced moral framework. Because since these divine figures are not morally perfect, people are less likely to follow them unquestioningly and would instead rely more on personal and collective ethics. So therefore, this could so we have to first explain exactly why this could be a good thing, because one, that means that there is a lot less fear-based judgments being made, because there are people who are using their own personal experience to relate to God. So this fear factor does not exist here as well. It also could encourage a culture of ethical reasoning, critical thinking, and we can talk about how moral standards are based on human empathy and the way they feel to each other and how they relate to each other, rather than this standard that has been set that is simply too high of a standard to reach. So therefore we can say that rather than following things unquestioningly, it gives them this ability to be able to apply these principles into their daily life and use it as example rather than a rule. So, secondly, we can go into how this impacts human empowerment and accountability. So, the thing with flawed gods is that humans feel more empowered to shape their own paths and their own destiny. So, why do we think that is? We think that dystheism could reduce dependency on divine intervention because it encourages individuals to take greater responsibilities for their own actions and for societal issues. This could lead to a society that values things like accountability and self reliance and puts more importance on human agency itself rather than divine will or divine command. Because now you actually have this idea that you can shape your own destiny. So then we can go into a third smaller subpoint. We can talk about how there are in many ancient societies. We can talk about how let's say, for example, the Greeks had gods with complex, flawed personalities. So instead of these societies didn't really collapse morally. Instead, they created rich cultures that acknowledge moral ambiguity, encouraging tolerance of diverse beliefs. So we see that a society that is based on diverse beliefs could be more open-minded and adaptable to different perspectives, as they understand that even divine beings are not morally absolute. So yeah, so that's in general. We can talk about that for proposition, and this could basically be summed up by saying at the end of the day, this we have this agency, human agency, a greater will or a greater importance that is being put on human agency, and also more people more likely to follow the religion simply because they feel like they can relate to it on a greater level, since there isn't this massive standard they need to hold it up to. And three, it is a religion or religions that could adapt more wholly and properly with the times. So let's go over to opposition then. What do we really talk about there? In there, we can talk about, first of all, we can talk about the loss of moral clarity and cohesion. So, for example, in a world with dystheistic gods, there's will be a struggle with moral clarity because people don't really know and lose the example of a perfect being, someone who has not committed any sort of sin, and gives you very easily the definition of what sin is. So this like level of ambiguity could lead to ethical um ethical issues. Basically, there is going to be a problem in clarity because morality becomes subjective and it becomes very inconsistent. Because if your god and your religious figure is like putting these actions forward that are not necessarily morally correct, but you still have to defend it to a certain extent, or they have to there has to be like in the scriptures that explicitly saying that these things are wrong. So what happens then when you have this kind of level of moral ambiguity? It leads to weakening of social cohesion because there are differing moral interpretations, and then there is basically ambiguity in accepted ethical standards, and this causes a lot of conflict because people don't know which side to believe and which side to turn to. So basically, then we can go into our second point, which is the potential for nihilism and disillusionment. So the problem is now that there is a belief in a morally questionable or indifferent God. So this leads to this idea of nihilism, as individuals may feel abandoned or even deceived by higher powers because they lose faith in what they consider justice in the world. So why exactly is that? Because they, for some reason, their actions aren't taken as aren't considered as correct or divine as these divine beings. So when they do something wrong, they feel the action immediately, but these gods seemingly don't. Therefore, they lose like faith in the concept of this religion itself. What does this mean? There is a greater decrease in I would say the quality of life, in the ethical implications of these people, because it affects what they believe in, and they don't really know what kind of system they should believe in, and it's easier to believe in nothing at all, or even believe that anything that they do is worthless, which leads to a decline in mental health, higher rates of despair, that kind of thing. So what does that lead to overall? We can say that there is a difficulty in upholding universal ethics. What does this mean? Because when you have this concept of an infallible God, it serves as a foundation for universal ethical principles, such as human rights issues, I would say justice, mercy, punishment. Dystheistic beliefs may erode this foundation, as divine commands are no longer seen as inherently good or just, because there is this gray area. It's quite unsure. It's harder for you to make sure exactly what you are defending and what you are not supposed to be defending, because these beings committing these actions, maybe they're saying afterwards that okay, you shouldn't really do this kind of thing, but since they have already done it, what gives you the right, and doesn't that give you the right to do those actions as well, and then later morally reflect on them? So what happens is that it makes it challenging to uphold these universal ethics because the moral authority of these divine beings is questioned, and by as an as an extension, the moral authority of these religious institutions become questioned as well. So this could be a massive issue, because then you don't really know what to trust and what scripture to trust, and therefore what morals and ethics you as a person should be following. So, okay, in terms of clashes, there are a few main clashes in this, one being moral cohesion versus moral pluralism. So, can we see that a dystheistic worldview create cohesive moral framework, or will it lead to an issue where these morals are questioned and everything becomes very, very murky? So then in the end of the day, which side can we see this kind of cohesion and people actually knowing what to really believe in, and does it impact people's morality? How does it impact people's morality, and which side does it better? And additionally, you can go into universal ethics and ethical, like what happens when this ethic gets fragmented as well. So we can see that these ethical standards will they persist without a morally perfect deity? Will this system basically override what we see in current status quo, or will ethical standards become fragmented in the absence of this kind of person to look up to? And we can also talk about religious authority versus um, like secularism overall, because will this dystheism undermine the authority of religious institutions, and what systems will be able to fill that role effectively without making sure that there isn't this murkiness or ambiguity again in the scriptures and points that they are putting forward? And do we see this kind of human empowerment, or will it lead to nihilism overall, like we talked before? Will this dystheism empower individuals to take control of their own morality, or does it create disillusionment by removing this perfect moral example that everyone can look up to? So basically, at the end of the day, we can conclude that by acknowledging that dietism offers this, it's a different system basically to the current status quo, and by analyzing what this means and how this relates to the system overall, you'll be able to have a more in-depth motion and hopefully a better debate. So thank you for listening. If you have any questions, please drop a comment. No worries at all. Thanks.